Hello everyone, and welcome to Hill Street. Today's story is Dragonoids Are Haunting My Town by Simba the Savage 8. If you end up enjoying this story, please leave a like. And if you enjoy hearing stories from me, please subscribe and become a resident of Hill Street, and let me know how I'm doing in the comments. Now, let's get to this nightmare. I woke up to that sickly sweet smell wafting around the room. That same sickly sweet smell which will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was extremely artificial, almost almondy, like somebody had sprayed cyanide through the house. I gagged and my mouth turned sour. I rushed to the toilet and vomited out what little there was in my stomach. Even then, I still felt queasy. The breakfast table was so quiet and so tense, you could hear a pin drop. The silence was only broken by the monotonous sizzle of bacon, eggs, and waffles in the pan. I took my seat and poured myself some cereal, though I didn't really feel like eating. My mother was in the kitchen. My father was at the head, reading a newspaper and squinting at the words through his gold-framed glasses. He hissed in pain with every itch. "Those damn mosquitoes," he muttered. It was a weird thing to say, since we had been under a bit of a dry spell recently. Not to mention, I hadn't heard the telltale buzzing from any bugs. "Maybe spray some repellent around the house," I suggested. "Maybe." His face was creased with pain. I finished my breakfast, grabbed my backpack, and slung it over my shoulder. As I trotted out the kitchen and out the front door, my eyes were drawn to his back. His shirt was ripped down to the center, and scar slashes down his back, shining too red. I watched as his fingernails raked his skin, then came off shining with blood. His skin itself was dull, like it was starting to lose all its color. My father winced again, snapping me out of it. I forced myself out the door without looking back. The sun was especially merciless today, beating down on my back. Despite the blistering heat though, I couldn't help but shiver. I could not keep images of my father's strange, liver-like skin out of my head. The streets were really quiet today. Usually at this time in the morning, I would see the hustle and bustle of people. But today, the only people I saw were around this rudimentary stone building I had never seen before. They were grunting and sweating like pigs, and they kept on scratching their backs, but they soldiered on. Weird. By the time I walked into my classroom and collapsed into my seat, I was sweating bullets. Even the fans my school had set up to cool us off did nearly nothing. I glanced at the clock. It was 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes to class, and I was the only one in school. The teacher wasn't even here yet. Tick, tick, tick. Maybe it was just me, but the second hand was getting slower and slower to move. The heat was wrapping around me like a warm blanket. I yawned. My eyes were closing. I couldn't remember what time I slept last night, but my head was woozy. The second hand was moving like a pendulum. Tick, tick, tick. I found myself in a room, distorted and twisted into angles beyond imagination. It was getting hotter here too. And as I watched the crimson levels on the thermometer on the wall trembled, it quickly rose. Shadows were dancing on the walls, twisting into monsters that were jerking like puppets. The room was strangely saturated. too many reds, too many oranges. At the same time, it began to smell weird, putrid, like someone was burning the sickly sweet perfume this morning. The thermometer finally exploded, drenching me in blood. I jerked away instinctively, and my hand brushed against something hot. My eyes opened up to fire. Metal and plastic were melting into goop that was spreading rapidly throughout the floor. Flames were dancing everywhere, tearing through everything like paper. My eyes watered at the smoke. It wasn't easy, but I gathered all my strength and forced myself throughout the classroom, spilling out the partially melted window. But I wished I didn't. Wished I'd stayed in my class and curled up in the fire and ignored every instinct of my brain to get out. Wished I'd stayed ignorant to whatever was going on outside, because what was going on outside was enough to make my heart nearly stop and made me scream silently. Tall figures were roaming around, really tall, like somebody had taken their head and stretched them all the way upwards and they couldn't spring back. Their skin was this really weird gray, like the ash and smoke from the burning buildings all around us had clung permanently to them, and wore what once resembled clothes. Wings sprouted from their backs, made of the same ashy gray skin, but it was a lot rougher and scalier, and beat out like the wings of a bat. And one of them turned around to look at me. I realized, my face pale, that it was my dad. But he was all wrong. He hissed at me and grinned, baring teeth that were curved downwards like fangs. He opened his mouth, and the next thing I knew, a big ball of fire shot into my direction, which I just managed to dodge. The school behind me exploded for the last time, concrete shattering around me. I rubbed my head, my mind whirling, desperately trying to figure out what to do, when a set of claws hooked into my shoulder. I twisted around and caught the sight of my mom, but she was all wrong too. She lifted me up, higher and higher, and below me were the flames and chaos of more people I recognized, but now looked nothing like themselves, flying around and hissing. I wondered if this wasn't what hell looked like. Finally, we came to a giant stone tower. It was a bundle of stones this morning, but now it had exploded upwards into a structure that looked like it was built by a toddler. Dragonoids were buzzing around like flies, carrying more stones in their claws and building it even higher. My mom tossed me through the opening. I tumbled across the hot stone floor and came face to face with a group of children. Their faces were pale, frightened, like mine. "Shh, it's all right," I said. I didn't sound so sure myself. Then I noticed they were scratching like mad. Skin was flaking off, to be replaced by those ashen gray scales. Wings unfolded behind them. They hissed collectively. I stepped back, my eyes darting around for some way out, but there wasn't any. How could there be a tower so tall it reached the sun? That was when I tripped on a loose stone. It cracked and plummeted down, down, and down. And at the same time, everything collapsed, and I was plunged into darkness. Hours had passed after that. Or is it days? I don't know. I've been trapped here for so long, and time is marked only by the rising and setting of the sun. by a gap in the stones a few inches wide. I've tried calling emergency services, only to be answered by a dial tone. I don't blame them. This is the middle of nowhere, in a town that is absolutely forgettable. But that isn't the only reason why I'm writing this all down on Reddit. Oh no. Because you see, this itch is burning through my body like fire, and I can't help scratching. It's getting easier now to scratch because of how my hands are slowly curving into scaly gray claws. Harder to type though. I'm starting to struggle to get those last few words out, but I still keep going on. Writing on Reddit helps me focus on trying to get out of here and get that help I so desperately want, because I can't help thinking how nice it is to stretch those wings slowly erupting from my back and bursting out of my prison like a wrecking ball. I'm sure I'm strong enough now, unlike my weak human self, and most importantly, sometimes. Dan, focus. I love watching the world burn.